Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the ultimate business survival toolkit, data collection methods. When you're looking at a complex research problem or trying to make a critical business decision, having a clever strategy is really only half the battle. The next critical step, the actual backbone of any thorough investigation, is the collection of data. So today, we're going to explore how systematically gathering, measuring, and analyzing information can completely transform the way you understand problems, find solutions, and ultimately draw actionable, highly accurate conclusions. Here's our agenda for today. We'll be looking at the power of data, qualitative versus quantitative data, collecting primary data, utilizing secondary data, and we'll wrap up with emerging modern data sources. Let's get right into it. So imagine you're launching a new startup. Let's call it EcoRide, an e-bike sharing company. If you don't actually have the facts on where people want to bike, you're essentially flying blind. To make sure EcoRide succeeds, you absolutely must collect data about user preferences, emerging tech trends, and what your competitors are up to. Without reliable data, even the most brilliant, well-thought-out strategies can completely crash and burn. Decisions have to be grounded in factual evidence, not just assumptions.
Let's dive straight into Section 1, the power of data.
Think of data collection as the very foundation of your entire toolkit. It's how you systematically gather, measure, and analyze information to truly back up your research. For example, local demographic data tells our EcoRide startup if a city actually has the population density to support e-bikes. Meanwhile, weather data might tell us, hey, reduce the fleet during snowy months so you can avoid heavy maintenance costs. By basing your decisions on reliably collected data, you replace guesswork with credibility, which massively improves your chances of success.
Moving right along to Section 2, qualitative versus quantitative data. A really good business detective uses two totally different lenses to view the world, qualitative and quantitative. Think of qualitative as the descriptive why and quantitative as the measurable how much. Both of these are incredibly vital to research. One gives you rich human depth, and the other gives you hard mathematical precision.
Let's break that down a bit further. Qualitative data explores that why. It comes in text, audio, or visual formats, like transcripts from interviews where early EcoRide testers explain exactly why they felt unsafe on certain roads. You analyze it by looking for underlying themes and feelings. On the flip side, quantitative data gives us scalable precision. It measures how much or how many using hard numbers, like tracking exactly how many miles those riders logged in their very first week.
To make this super concrete, say you see a stat stating that 80% of students scored above 75 marks, or that 80% of our e-bike users ride during rush hour. That right there is the stark statistical reality of quantitative data. It's structured, it's objective, and it's absolutely ideal for identifying patterns or testing hypotheses. But remember, the best research often uses both together. You use qualitative data to understand customer emotions and quantitative data to measure widespread satisfaction levels.
All right, on to Section 3, collecting primary data. So, where do we actually go to get this data? Well, primary data is your original first-hand information. You're collecting it specifically for your current study. It's not pre-existing, it's entirely custom to you and your unique research questions. These primary methods branch out into surveys, interviews, focus group discussions, and direct observation. Surveys gather standardized information from a large group. Interviews and focus groups dig deep into specific thoughts. And observation lets you just watch raw behavior without ever asking a single question. And sure, conducting these surveys might mean awkwardly standing on a street corner with a clipboard getting ignored by pedestrians, but honestly, the highly specific data you gather is absolute gold. Of course, there are pros and cons here. The huge advantage is that primary data is highly specific to your purpose and incredibly accurate because you collected it yourself, completely free from outside manipulation. The downside? It is seriously time-consuming and expensive. A small startup might not have the budget to survey an entire city. Plus, you have to be really careful as an interviewer not to unintentionally lead respondents to specific answers, because that introduces bias and completely ruins your data. Which brings us to Section 4, utilizing secondary data. What if you just don't have the time or the budget to survey thousands of people? That is exactly when you head into the archives. Secondary data involves looking at pre-existing information that someone else already gathered and processed. You can use internal sources, like past sales records, or external sources like government publications, online databases, or World Bank reports. For EcoRide, looking up a city's existing traffic reports to map out bike lanes is a classic, brilliant use of secondary data.
The real beauty of the archives is speed and cost-effectiveness. It gives you instant access to massive global datasets that you could never possibly gather on your own. But you definitely have to watch out for the pitfalls. The data might be outdated, or maybe it just doesn't perfectly align with what you actually need. And here's the kicker. If the original study was flawed, you are inheriting those exact same errors. You always have to rigorously verify the credibility of your secondary sources.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Emerging Modern Data Sources.
As our business landscape evolves, so does our investigative toolkit. Today's digital frontier generates quintillions of bytes of data every single day, and so much of it is stored in massive online repositories. In this digital age, researchers can instantly tap into these specialized databases, gaining access to dynamic, large-scale modern datasets. It allows us to track intricate trends that inform some really sophisticated business strategies.
Now, here is the real secret. The absolute strongest, most rigorous strategy uses a dual approach. By pairing secondary data, like broad industry reports, with primary data, like a highly targeted customer survey, you get a complete, bulletproof picture. This dual approach ensures your study benefits from both broad contextual knowledge and incredibly detailed first-hand insights.
So take a close look at your own decision-making processes. Data collection is the absolute backbone of successful strategic planning. Whether you're using qualitative interviews to find out why, quantitative surveys to find out how many, or diving deep into global data sets, utilizing this toolkit properly is exactly what separates the businesses that guess from the businesses that know for sure. Which one will you be?